Want to know where you can lose money on a fix and flip? Well, today we're pulling back the curtains on flipping. Today we're talking about where fix and flips go wrong and how to avoid it. And if you're enjoying this real estate content and you want to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So before we dive into this topic of how flips go wrong or where they can go wrong, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you're doing?
Yeah. So it really started out when I was really young. My dad used to buy houses and fix them and flip them. So I've been exposed to that through a lot of my life. I didn't really get into it though until later. I got a job working in the corporate life. And then I got a condo and got married. So I moved in with my wife and I had a condo. So I became a landlord. Shortly after that, I decided I wanted to put my hand into fixing and flipping a house, see if I could do what they do on HGTV. So I started that out about a couple years ago. I did a couple houses while I was working my job, and then about 6 months ago, I switched to full time and have been flipping houses since.
That's awesome. So you turned your hobby into your day job and you quit your day job.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
I
awesome.
when I whenever I walk into a house, I'm like, "Oh, you know what could be different about this house?" I don't know if you get that at all when you're looking at houses, but yeah, I love to make that dream come true.
Yeah, I love real estate. I've been buying and selling since 1999 when my dad helped me get into my first place. And it was one of those things for me where like I might stop by an open house or something even if I wasn't in the market. And so anyway, when I quit my job and moved back to Colorado, I was looking for a job in my field. I worked in HR consulting for a long time. And then a friend of mine mentioned to me, I think you'd really like real estate. You should check into that. And here we are.
Nice.
I love it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, all right. So, where flips can go wrong. What are some of the most common mistakes that you think flippers make that end up, kind of going into this nightmare situation or where they don't make money or they lose money?
Yeah, I think probably the most common one is with contractors. I think there's a lot of different ways projects can go wrong with contractors. They sometimes it's misunderstanding. Sometimes you run into problems that you didn't know ran into, and now you're short on money. And so that all kind of adds and feeds into your relationship with contractors. Sometimes you get a bad contractor, right? But that's probably the most common pitfall, especially for a new investor, is getting the wrong contractor or having challenges with contractors.
I think you're right. I mean, that backs up kind of my opinions about it, which is I never even attempted doing a flip because I'm not handy. So I knew that I would be relying on some contractor or contractors. And I never felt like, I had somebody kind of in my back pocket that I could really rely on to do the job well and get it done in the time frame to be able to be successful because that's the thing, like, you have a timeline, you have holding costs, you're usually using hard money, and when you start to blow that timeline, it eats away at your profits so quickly.
Yeah, and if you get a bad contractor halfway through a project, or if they stop doing work, then you almost have to start from square one again with a new contract and all that stuff. Like that's very challenging. But the way you combat that often is you just got to build good relationships with your contractors and you got to know how to talk to them, how to pay them, and when to pay them, and make sure that everything's in writing. That's always very important. And make sure that you follow through on your end as well as making sure that they're doing the work they need to do.
Well, and when we're talking about timelines, you can only go off of what the contractor says, right? Like, because they should know how long it's going to take them to complete XYZ job. But also, you were talking earlier about permitting. Can you talk a little bit about timelines for permitting? I know it's probably different in different cities and for different types of permitting, but just ballparks.
Yeah, that I don't know if I can do a ballpark. Permitting can be very challenging. It's really kind of up to the city and how they feel about things. I think, like, right around, COVID, the city shut down and permitting grind to a halt, and so it became very difficult to get things through from a permitting perspective. So it really kinda depends on the mood of the city and how things are going, so that is one challenge, and I've seen projects get put on hold for 2 or 3 months just to get the permit approved. So definitely something to be considering, and that definitely weighs against, like, whether you should permit it something or not. Um, yeah, so that definitely impacts your timeline often.
Well, and when you're talking about the timeline, so you've got the contractor's timeline, you have some permitting timelines,
Mhm.
and this whole time, you've likely borrowed hard money, which is a high interest rate. Like, were you saying it's like 10 or 12%
Yeah, that's
usually?
correct, yep.
And so are you making monthly payments on that usually? They're not waiting to get paid at the end, right?
Yeah, that's a typical hard money or construction loan. You are making payments throughout that process. There are some investors that are more kind of, like, in it with you, that will wait till the end to collect their money.
Okay, so it kind of depends on where you're getting the money from. Um, There was something else I was thinking about with the timing. This is an interesting little story. So, I had some buyers who found a flip and we went under contract on it. And I had looked at it and it was actually only 2 months. They flipped that so fast. So it was only 2 months from the time that they purchased and closed on it to the time that they had it back on the market. And boy, wasn't that an interesting time to find out some things about FHA loans.
Mm.
So, my buyers had an FHA loan, and we became aware of all of these rules that, like, you cannot get an FHA loan that is inside of 90 days from when they bought that property. So we actually had to just put our deal on hold, wait until we hit that 90-day mark, and then we had to sign a whole brand new contract and kind of start over. I mean, we had already done inspections, but we had to kind of like start over at that 90-day mark. Like I said, just kind of interesting fun fact.
Can't be too good at your job, I guess.
Right? What else? What are other common mistakes that flippers make? We talked about timelines.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm curious, what kind of cushion do you put into your projects for unknowns? Because I know we've all seen the fix and flip shows, and we know how once you go in and demo, like there's no telling what you're going to find back there. So,
Yeah.
how do you cushion for that?
Yeah, in general, I do a rehab estimate of all the things I can see, and then I can kind of take a guess on the things I can't see depending on when I'm buying a house. Sometimes I have to decide right then and there if I'm buying a house, and I might not have time to, like, look at the roof or the sewer. So, kind of depending on what I might think is going to be wrong, I'll cushion differently, but generally it's about 10%. I'll take what I think I know is there and then add an additional 10% to cover any unknowns.
Well, and this is, the more experience that you get in the field, I think the better you are at estimating, like, how much money will it take to do the kitchen, how much money for the bathroom. But if you're just getting into this, I think you're really reliant on a contractor to, give you those numbers and to be pretty spot on with them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the contractor should have some margins built into there. But yeah, you would always want to build that on top of your end. I think that's probably the the most difficult part to estimating or to getting into a fix and flip is knowing what your cost should be or could be, and then also how to, like, maybe change that if something changes. So changing finishes if you go over budget somewhere else or something like that.
Well, and circling back to the contractor thing, because I know we're hitting on this pretty hard, but also, like, if I were going to flip something and I hired the contractor, and then, like, you just sort of assume that they're doing their job, right? And maybe I still have a day job and this is a side project, like how you started out, right? And I think one of the most dangerous things that you can do is leave that contractor alone and not check in on them. Like, how often do you think you should be walking your property and checking your project?
Yeah, I do it at least weekly. And I think that's a good way to one, build a rapport, right? I think that probably goes further in making sure a project is successful than just kind of like checking in on them. Because there's a lot of questions that build up in their mind, and maybe they don't have time to text it to you and ask you for direction. But when you just happen to be there, they like pop out. And so you can go bam, 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 and work out through all that stuff. And if that goes on for 2 weeks or 3 weeks without you being there, there's probably some things that are getting forgotten or lost or might have dependencies on other things. So I definitely do once a week, depending on kind of like where we're at. When we're really close to the end of the project and we're finishing things up, I'm there like 2, maybe 3 times a week just to try and make sure things are getting done.
Now, you tell me if I'm right about this, but I think, like, if you're gonna try to get into flipping and flippers are cost conscious, right? But I don't think it's the best idea to go bottom of the barrel on everything in terms of finishes. So, like, type of flooring, type of countertops, all of that kind of stuff. Because I know, like, in fact, just recently, I walked through a recently flipped place with some buyers, and they're kind of at the low end of a price point in Denver. But they walked through and I kind of glanced around and I was like, oh, this looks nice and new and pretty. And they immediately caught on to the fact that the finishes were cheap and low quality, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Like, they'd rather buy something that they have to upgrade themselves than buy something that was done cheaply. So, when we talk about like cheap countertop or cheap carpet, laminate countertops, but then there's also the other end of that where, like, it doesn't make any sense to put in the highest quality stuff either. So can you talk a little bit about, like, how do you find, like, a good middle point that's gonna sell well and feel like quality, but it's not, like, over the top?
Yeah, I think that's the other aspect other than the actual rehab part is knowing your after repair value or what that product needs to look like, right? So you can certainly look at the other houses that have sold in the area and I more or less copy what they've done, at least to the same quality of finishing work. I never go above because I don't know that the market would ever kind of reward me in that finish, right? If I spend, an extra $5,000 on the kitchen, I don't know that I would get that back. So you don't ever want to over finish, right? At least compared to what's been out there and sold successfully. As far as like doing a lower end rehab, that's really sad that someone put in efforts and it was just like low grade products. Because it's like right now a big part in the market is labor is just expensive. That's the most expensive piece in a flip. And if you're going to be touching the carpet, just go a little bit more, right? Like it's not that much harder to get a little bit better product and more bang for your buck. Um, so yeah, it's definitely a balance, and it was probably just a very, very cheap flip. Would be my guess on that particular one.
So you're saying that labor being the highest cost of the flip, that the finishing, like, you'd never wanna be at the bottom, but we also know we don't wanna be at the top. So, kind of, are you pretty safe if you just go into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever and kinda pick the middle range of stuff?
Yeah, I think as far as the actual, so it all depends on where you're going, right? If you're at like the $1 million plus range, you you're not going to Home Depot generally. You're going to go somewhere else to kind of get a little bit nicer appliances, a little bit nicer products. But if you're, below there, you're going to be doing like a lot of your typical stores, Home Depot, Lowe's, Floor and Decor, right? You'll get a lot of that stuff there, and you can get I don't think price point is really as critical. I'm thinking tile, I don't know why I'm going there, but, like, you can spend a lot on tile, but you can also spend not very much on tile, and if it fits well within, like, the color scheme and the other finishes, you can it looks good. If it looks good, it's good.
Well, I know when I walk through a house, like, I'm I'm not looking at type of tile, but I am seeing, is it tile or not? Like in the bathrooms, is it just the cheap shower surround or is it tile? And if it's tile, does it go all the way to the ceiling or is it just does it like stop right above the shower head? So, I guess I never thought about what type of tile cuz I it doesn't even matter to me cuz I'm looking at is it tile or not.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Let's see, what else do we have here? Do you have any do you have any specific ways that you're trying to protect yourself from a market shift? Because I know we've kind of talked about how the market has shifted from seller's market to buyer's market in the last couple of years, especially last year in 2025. Um, and we never know, right? We don't have the crystal ball, so we don't know when the market's going to shift again. So are there any things that you're doing that you feel like protect you a little bit from market fluctuations?
Yeah, there's 2 things. One is creating a really tight timeline, because that'll minimize if a market shifts, right, and you're holding something for a year, it's gonna shift a lot more than if you're holding something for 3 months.
That makes sense.
So making a really tight timeline. One of the tricks that I do is when I get a house under contract, I'll like bring in my contractors while I'm under contract and my designers to really start scoping out the project. So the second we buy, we're like things are shipping to the house, right?
Mhm.
So really making a timeline really tight and concise definitely minimizes your exposure in that environment. The other piece that isn't always doable, but can be a temporary solution is other exit strategies. Here in the Denver market, it's really hard to make your money back in, say, renting a property. I like Arvada. Arvada allows short-term rentals, so you can definitely get more of your money while you're holding on to that if you want to hold on to it for 2 or 3 years. But kind of always keeping a second strategy in that process is will also minimize your impact or exposure to that risk.
Having backup plans.
Mhm.
I like that. Um, Let me see, what else do we have here? Mm. Oh, I wanted to ask you, what is your shortest time frame that you've flipped something, and what's your longest time frame? Because I'm just curious now.
Oh, yeah. I think my shortest time frame, I'm getting really good at 3 month from purchase to list.
Okay.
And then, if I can sell it, I think 3, 4 months is like kind of my sweet spot. I'm hoping on my next flip, I get like, what is 3 months minus 2 weeks. I hope I can do it in 2 weeks less. And we're kind of talking full house remodel, right?
Mhm.
I've definitely done a couple condos that are like 1 month in and out.
Smaller.
Yeah.
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 And let's talk about, strategic pricing because I think that a new flipper or someone who's interested in getting into real estate investing like this, they might tend to be more the mindset of like a homeowner seller where they've got some emotional attachment to the property and maybe a dollar amount in mind for their after rehab value and maybe hanging on to that a little too tightly than just really looking at what's happening in the market. What are the closed comps looking like, and where are we gonna price? So will you talk a little bit about, how you strategically price things to sell?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Before you get into a project, it's really important to know your comparables, right? What are you aiming for? Sometimes you'll like look at houses of similar square footage and you'll see there's like $1 million and then you'll see a 750 and you're like, oh, I could get $1 million. Oh, that's a 2 story, not a ranch with a basement, right? So really making sure that you understand your ARV before you get into the project will help mitigate any sort of overspend on the project. When you go to list, I like to list below where I think my competition is.
Mhm.
So even if my initial ARV is like 750, when I come to the market and go to list, if there are $700,000 properties out there, I'm going to list at like 680. right? I'm going to go a little bit low because it's going to get a lot more attention and people are going to feel like they're getting something more in that situation.
I love that type of pricing. It's something that I've been recommending for a while now to my sellers is that, like, let's look at what the comps say and then let's undercut it significantly. Because, once you hit the market with it, that's when your most serious buyers are out shopping right now. They're watching for things to hit the market. They see it hit the market and they will know, like buyers know, like this is a good deal because they've been shopping, right? So when you do that, you are generating so much more traffic. And then, my thing always is like I want to generate enough traffic that we have multiple offers. And now we are getting through the multiple offer process. Hopefully we are getting more of what I think that the market value is because I'm pricing it under what I think the market value is, which is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen houses sit,
Mhm.
then they mark the price down, and then they mark the price down, and then someone like undercuts even that price, right? Even though that house may have been like in the middle somewhere there, but because they originally overpriced it, that's where they get into trouble.
Well, and that can happen not even on originally overpricing something. That can happen on pricing it at what you truly think the market value is. Like you think it's a fair price, but it's because we're in the buyer's market. They have so many choices. They have so much time to shop. They know they have choices. So they're not impressed by anything that is listed at market value.
Yeah. Yep. I hope I don't have you coming to my house.
Yeah, you're not gonna tell me what any of your
Yeah.
listings are you? What else do we have? Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but maybe you have one or two other little pieces of what really separates somebody from being a successful flipper from the failed flippers.
Yeah, I think there's 3, maybe 4 components. The first one is being able to estimate what you think the property is going to sell for. The
Wait,
Hmm?
hire a good realtor.
Yes, absolutely. A good realtor is key here, yeah. They're gonna be honest with you, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece. The second piece is making sure your rehab is good and staying as much to that budget as possible. That's kind of like the operations. Like how good are you at, finding the right labor, staying on top of them, working with them, right? I think the other 2 pieces is just making I don't know actually. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I hate when that happens. Yeah, don't even worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but those are the 2
So
pieces.
separating the successful flippers from the failed flippers. And you thought 3 or 4, but we got 2.
Yeah, yeah. So the first 2 is your estimated value,
Mhm.
your estimated rehab costs. The third piece is going to be like the operation, right? How well you're working with that contractor, how well you're keeping to your timeline, and how much you can actually manage the project to make sure you get it within where you want it. If you kind of get those 3 things, you're going to be key. I would say from an educational standpoint, the first 2 kind of come hand in hand. You can kind of get away with like learning the operation a little later, but getting a good estimate and a good rehab value is important.
Mhm. Well, and I think too, thinking about it, even if you are doing it as a hobby, like you started out doing it as a hobby, treating it like a business.
Hmm.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Brent. We talked quite a bit about how flips can go wrong and how to make them go right. So appreciate all of your insight and advice on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah. If you're thinking about flipping in Denver, call or text me before you start swinging that hammer. If you like this content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.